U.S. consumer prices rise by 0.4% in December. Germany's economy contracts 0.2% in 2024. And the Kremlin says a response to U.S. oil sanctions has not been ruled out. Welcome to the Qnews Economic Bulletin. I'm Hani Asif, and we will present the latest developments shaping the global economy, from key market trends and financial updates to regional economic highlights and forecasts. And we bring the essential news and analysis to keep you informed, and we will be following up on the latest reports of a Gaza ceasefire agreement that has been reached.
Because the fact make America great again.
Have Joe Biden.
Taken back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this just in: an Egyptian high-level source has confirmed that a joint statement will be issued soon and has announced that an agreement has been reached to end the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza through mediation efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, an Egyptian high-level source has confirmed that a joint statement will be issued soon and has announced that an agreement has been reached to end the suffering of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip through mediation efforts. And now we start off with our economic bulletin, and we start with the United States, that as consumer prices rose by 0.4% in December, marking the largest increase in 9 months, driven by a 2.6% surge in energy prices, including a 4.4% jump in gasoline costs. Food prices also saw a 0.3% rise. Despite inflation remaining elevated at 2.9% year-on-year, underlying price pressures showed signs of easing, with core inflation, excluding food and energy, up by 0.2%. The Federal Reserve is expected to take a cautious approach to interest rate cuts, with markets betting on a rate reduction in June. The central bank's focus remains on addressing inflation, with President-elect Trump's economic policies adding uncertainty. The Mortgage Bankers Association has stated that the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage rose to 7.09% in the week ending January 10th, the highest in 8 months, continuing a 5-week upward trend. Despite the Federal Reserve cutting short-term borrowing rates, mortgage rates have been climbing, influenced by rising Treasury yields amid inflation concerns and fiscal challenges. This increase in mortgage rates, coupled with rising house prices and limited supply, is putting additional pressure on prospective home buyers. The U.S. Treasury Department has reported that the U.S. government recorded an $87 billion budget deficit in December. This was driven partly by a shift of benefit payments into November, while marking a $711 billion deficit for the first 3 months of the current fiscal year. The December deficit was significantly lower than the $129 billion posted the same month last year. However, the overall fiscal year-to-date deficit rose by 39% or $201 billion compared to 2024, as government spending increased and revenues slightly declined. U.S. imports from China saw a strong finish to 2024, driven by the stockpiling of goods such as apparel, toys, furniture and electronics ahead of Donald Trump's proposed tariffs. Imports surged by 14.5% in December, with an uptick in final goods shipments as businesses prepared for potential tariffs of 10 to 60% on consumer products. In 2024, U.S. imports from China, including bedding, toys and machinery, rose 15% compared to 2023. Moving on to Europe, Germany's economy contracted 0.2% in 2024, following a 0.3% decline in 2023, marking the second consecutive year of shrinkage. The country is now only 0.3% larger than in 2019, highlighting its stagnation over the past 4 years. Weak consumer spending, rising energy costs, high interest rates, and competition from China have hit Germany's economy hard. Exports, particularly in cars and industrial machinery, shrank as global trade grew. The Office for National Statistics has reported that British inflation eased unexpectedly in December, with the annual rate dropping to 2.5% from 2.6% in November. Core inflation, closely monitored by the Bank of England, also fell more than expected, providing a boost to financial markets after recent volatility. Finance Minister Rachel Reeves welcomed the news, but emphasized the need for continued efforts as analysts forecast that inflation could rise above 3% in early 2025. Markets have almost fully priced in 2 rate cuts for the year ahead, up from a 60% likelihood before the data release. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced heated scrutiny in Parliament over the economy, despite recent data showing a surprising slowdown in inflation. Conservative leader Keir Starmer criticised Labour's budget, claiming it would lead to job losses, slower growth and higher borrowing costs. Starmer defended his government's economic strategy, blaming the previous Conservative administration for financial mismanagement and reaffirming his support for Finance Minister Rachel Reeves.
That, Mr. Speaker, as she knows, the global economy is experiencing volatility and higher borrowing costs. That is why it was vital that we took the tough and right decisions in the budget to get our finances back in order. We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole that they left. We made difficult cuts, raised taxes to invest in health, public services and housing, vital to stability, vital to growth. And we've got an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. And she will welcome, no doubt, the inflation figures from this morning. But contrast that with the party opposite. They weren't brave enough in government to take those difficult decisions. They've opposed all of our measures to stabilise the economy and promote growth. They're back to the magic money tree. She wants all the benefits of the budget, but she can't say how she's going to pay for them. They haven't changed. They're still economic vandals and fantasists. Imagine where we'd be if they were still in charge.
The Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales has reported that British business confidence fell to its lowest level in 2 years in late 2024. The index dropped to 0.2 in the fourth quarter, down from 14.4 in the third quarter, driven by concerns over tax hikes in Labour government's first budget. The October budget, led by Finance Minister Rachel Reeves, introduced significant employer payroll tax increases, sparking record concerns among businesses about the tax burden and slowing domestic demand. British Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philip has criticised Prime Minister Keir Starmer for acting too slow over concerns regarding Anti-Corruption Minister Tulip Siddique's financial ties to her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, the ousted Bangladeshi Prime Minister. Siddique resigned on Tuesday, citing her role as a distraction to the government's work, despite denying any wrongdoing. Starmer had previously expressed full confidence in Siddique. The government's ethics advisor concluded Siddique had not breached the ministerial code, but noted she failed to fully consider reputational risks tied to her family's connections.
To look at evidence of the laundered proceeds of corruption finding its way into the UK, they should be investigating the source of.
The Deputy Director of China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, Li Bin, says China plans new foreign exchange policies in 2025 to support high-quality enterprises and foreign-funded firms. These reforms aim to promote economic growth, openness, and financial security. Key measures include simplifying foreign direct investment processes, expanding benefits for small and medium enterprises and regional banks, and increasing financing quotas for tech companies. Efforts will also focus on supporting free trade zones like Hainan and the Greater Bay Area, while maintaining a stable renminbi exchange rate and balanced international payments. The People's Bank of China has reported that the Chinese yuan has become the fourth most active currency for global payments. In 2024, cross-border yuan payments reached 64 trillion yuan, marking a 23% year-on-year increase. The yuan's international use has grown, with over 80 foreign central banks now including it in their reserves. Offshore yuan deposits in Hong Kong surpassed 1 trillion yuan, and loan balances neared 700 billion yuan. Both figures represent record highs. Governor Kazuo Ueda says the Bank of Japan will consider raising interest rates at its meeting next week unless Donald Trump causes market volatility. Ueda noted that the rate hikes could occur if Japan's economy and wages continue to improve. Market expectations for a rate rise are high, with wage trends and U.S. policies being key factors. Analysts anticipate a hike next week if markets remain stable, with potential further increases later in the year. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has announced a landmark agreement with the World Bank to secure $20 billion in funding over the next decade. The plan, known as the Country Partnership Framework, will focus on addressing climate change, boosting private sector growth, and enhancing clean energy and climate resilience. The World Bank's support aims to drive policy reforms, expand fiscal space, and encourage private investment in sectors such as energy, agriculture, manufacturing, and digital infrastructure. This funding comes as Pakistan navigates a severe economic crisis, with the country currently under a $7 billion IMF bailout. Ladies and gentlemen, focusing now on the ceasefire agreement taking place. We're joined from Cairo by Dr. Jahed Al-Horizien, Professor of Political Science, to discuss the Gaza ceasefire deal. Welcome, sir, to Q News. First off, let me ask you, what is the latest information about the agreement of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, and what does it entail? Dr. Jihad Al-Hourizian, Professor of Political Science, we are discussing the Gaza ceasefire deal. Sir, what can you tell us about the pointers and what this deal entails?
I think that the matters are reached an agreement, and within the upcoming hours there will be announcing the reach of the ceasefire. Particularly, there was a great Egyptian effort to have an approachment in reaching this agreement and fill the gap between the two sides. And therefore, I think that this agreement that would guarantee the ceasefire to be for the Palestinian people to have a break, particularly after the very genocide war that practiced against them. And it's a high time for these people to have a break through the mediators' effort. And hence, I think that the phases have been agreed upon. If we look at it previously, we found that these phases that been proposed by the Arab Republic of Egypt through the initiative presented in May of the last year, and working to execute, to end this crushing crisis. And I think the announcement about the ceasefire agreement to be presented in the upcoming hours would shape a new phase to lead to the calm the situation and to qualify an agreement of all the parties. And particularly, it's been agreed upon to release a number of what if named about 340 in Israeli hostages under the humanitarian phase, based primarily to release the senior people, in addition to those who are under the 19 years old, including women and children. In return, about 1,000 of the Palestinian prisoners to be released, of those who have been sentenced by the life in prison. In addition to one of the main articles of the ceasefire agreement, and through the deal, that the process of delivering the humanitarian aid, i.e. 600 of truckloads of the shipments on daily basis that include the food assistance and as well as the medical assistance, and provided to reach throughout the Gaza Strip, as well as the Gaza city that's been deprived throughout the past periods of time. Therefore, I think that the matters regarding the first week of releasing 3 hostages in the beginning, and then 4, and then to continue the process throughout the 42 days consecutively. All these fruitful efforts made by Egypt in the association with the state of Qatar and the United States of America, I think that they worked to save the Palestinian people of this circle of violence and massacres, and we are about the changes that lead to this agreement through the efforts and a set of regional and international variables that lead to this agreement.
Dr. Harazin, just to get things clear now, you spoke about the exchange of prisoners and the hostages, but is this ceasefire agreement a permanent one or is it a temporary one? And if so, then how long would it last?
I think the first phase that has been agreed upon, the ceasefire that will be extended to the first phase as a test, but Egypt and the mediators pressed to include the negotiations of the second phase in the 16 days of the first phase that was extended to 42 days. That would pave the way to the ceasefire and the not to leave or any part to be evade of disagreement, to abide the ceasefire. And if we have reached to the ultimate path regarding the release of all Israeli hostages as well as the Palestinian prisoners, I think the matters will be ready for a ground of a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire. Particularly that the third phase is talking about a full withdrawal of the Israeli occupation army from the areas in the Gaza Strip and to start of the process of reconstruction and to the things that was before the 7th of October. Therefore, I think that what's been agreed upon is based on the first phase, then the second phase, and that lead to ceasefire, that each phase would extend it to 6 weeks, more than 126 days consecutively of calm, that would be extended basically to 4 months, i.e. to pave the way completely to continue the ceasefire, to be transferred from partially to a permanent, and the matter should be cleared upon that time, particularly that there are provisions imposed against Netanyahu, particularly from symmetry, in case of a breach of ceasefire will get guaranteed by the United States of America, so there will be have some sort of continuation of the fighting. Hence the role of mediators that guaranteed its matter not to let each party to the process of a breach of a ceasefire and the full compliance of all the articles agreed upon in these phases, whether the first, the second, and the third, while as the dilemma in the previous negotiation is to separate the phases from the first to the second to the third, but Egypt and mediators managed to reach, to integrate the process of negotiation into within the first phase to move forward into the second phases to a full process of negotiations and by all the parties. I mean integration of all 3 phases of all parties that would lead it to a sustainable and a permanent ceasefire and to start a process of reconstruction and humanitarian aids and the intervention politically to create an applicable environment that is capable to control the matters among the all parties, and not to let any attempt of any failures fall of the efforts made by the mediators.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Harazin, now you've mentioned a possible troop withdrawal from Gaza, maybe at the latter stages, but would there be any partial withdrawal as we progress through the different phases?
I think the matter has been agreed upon. It is related to the issue of the final and ultimate withdrawal upon the end of the phases, i.e. no presence of the Israeli army within the Strip. But it seems that Netanyahu and wishes that some issues that require more negotiation, that is related to have some sort of a buffer zone to be extended throughout 60 kilometers, starting from the north Indian to the south of Gaza. This buffer zone that would extend it to the depths of Palestine of a space of 1 kilometer, that leaded to a sort of negotiation to minimize this space, to go back to the 300 to 500 meters. And they think that they would cut spaces that overseed more than 65 square meters of Gaza Strip, that Gaza basically do not exceed 63 square kilometers. This is from one side. Therefore, I think that the process of withdrawal would start in the first phase. We found what has been reported through witnesses that Israel that started to dismantle of some of the military facilities were built in midstream axis of Rashid Street that has been determined upon the agreement as an area to let the Palestinians to cross, if they wish, from moving from the south to the north. What is related to the second phase is the Israeli army will withdraw completely from Netzarim axis or Philadelphia, as well as the northern areas, such as Netzarim axis existed by the Israeli occupation during this period. This matter will go in return to create of fighting and a political horizon of this area related to the who is going to manage the matters in the Gaza Strip and to be able to discipline the security and to abide with the commitment. Not to give, once again, Netanyahu and its governing coalition to taking the advantage of these matters. Hence, the suspended matters related to the mechanisms of both parties, including Egypt and other European and regional countries with the PLO in fighting mechanism of execution. This matter on the ground and not to leave any gaps through which Netanyahu and Symmetry will go back to fight in Gaza again. We should remember, as always, that Israel, no matter how much they build of places, they can dismantle it or to start to withdraw from them, or leave it to this context. And we found in 2005 of redeployment in Gaza Strip between night and day, and left the settlers and the settlement. All these matters would be leave to the upcoming days, and to what extent of the commitment. There's a sense of cautious matters by Netanyahu. Is he going to have enough or to go back to fight under any pretext? Therefore, it is up to Netanyahu, as Netanyahu government is the one that practicing the killing and the aggression against the Palestinian people, and that to occupy a great portion of the Gaza territories either through the access existed by them or the military presence. In addition, what is called by the maps, the Israeli withdrawal of some areas, such as the housing areas, that would lead us to have a question. Is Israel going to withdraw from area being evacuated from the people, such as in the Gaza Strip or the areas of the borders that extended through for more than 42 kilometers? This matter that should be clarified and to be asserted ultimately at the end of this agreement, and with to have a full withdrawal from Gaza Strip, withdraw its troops to beyond the borders area, and to leave some areas existed previously as buffer zones of 30 meters. This matter should go back before the 7th of October of 2023.
Dr. Jihad Al-Harazin, thank you very much, sir, for joining us and your insights. Still with our coverage regarding reaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement, we're joined now from Cairo by Dr. Mohammed Osman, the International Relations Specialist. Dr. Osman, thank you for joining us now here on Qnews. Sir, now how feasible is the gradual Israeli withdrawal from central Gaza and the return of displaced persons to the northern strip as outlined in the deal?
Thank you, Hannah, for having me. It seems that at last we have a definitive agreement, a final agreement that can put an end to this war, or so we know so far. The preliminary provisions of the first stage of the agreement suggest that Israel should, or would, according to Reuters at least, withdraw from central Gaza and the urban areas, or the inhabited urban areas, at earnest in the first stage of the ceasefire. I think this is the first serious step towards halting and putting an end to this vile genocidal war of aggression launched by Israel against the Palestinian people of Gaza. However, even though this pushes us to be optimistic and encourages us to be optimistic, however, we need to be careful and we need to be observant when we are dealing with this. Israel will require a substantial amount of pressure from the United States and the international community as a whole in order to stick to implementing this agreement to the end. They have to see it implemented to the end to ensure the Israeli withdrawal from the designated parts of Gaza, to ensure that there will be no violations, that the ceasefire will be observed, that there will be no airstrikes or any targeting of civilians or any other objects inside the Gaza Strip, as we see, for example, in southern Lebanon, in the very peculiar and strange ceasefire arrangement they have over there. However, it is a positive sign, and I think that the Trump administration has shown that they can exact much more meaningful and effective pressure on the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu in particular, way more than the incompetent Biden administration.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Osman, now 600 truckloads of humanitarian aid are to be allowed into Gaza every day during the ceasefire period. How significant is this process in the ceasefire deal?
It is very significant because the Palestinian people in Gaza have been suffering for the 1.3 years, 1 year and 3 months, past 1 year and 3 months, with a severe and acute humanitarian crisis. The people have been deprived of their basic necessities due to the stifling of the flow of aid into the Gaza Strip. Northern Gaza has not seen the entry of any humanitarian aid in weeks, if not months. There were several miniature famines in several parts of Gaza, especially in the north. Hundreds of people have died from hunger and malnutrition, if not thousands, and also because of the lack of medicine and basic commodities in general. So now with the entry of 600 truckloads of aid, including 50 fuel trucks, and 300 of those 600 trucks will go to northern Gaza, which has been ravaged and completely destroyed and basically wiped off the face of the earth by the Israeli war machine. I think this is very significant. This will bring life back into the Gaza Strip. Now the Palestinians of Gaza can live with hope that tomorrow could be better than the terrible circumstances they have to live in today due to Israel's criminal course of action inside the Gaza Strip.
Yes, hopefully so. Well, Dr. Osman, please stay with us. But we're also now joined by the managing editor of Al-Ahram newspaper, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, to discuss the latest updates regarding the agreement reached to end the Palestinian suffering in Gaza. Now, sir, how critical is before the 50 tanks, or including fuel, how significant or important is it the gradual Israeli withdrawal from central Gaza and the return of displaced persons to the northern strip?
This agreement could be the best solution provided since the Al-Aqsa flood operation to head into the Israeli territories that contains several negotiations throughout the past months. Some made some successes, but in the last moment before reaching the final agreement, we found Netanyahu is deteriorated and due to the pressure of the internal from the allies from Israel and never pay attention to the proposals of the regional international powers. Now, through the Egyptian mediators, along with the US mediators that provided approachment and proposals that played a great role to remove several obstacles. In addition to the arrivals of Donald Trump to the House, to the White House, by sending messages to Israel that he reach an agreement before the 20th of the January. Otherwise, hell will enter the Middle East after according to his description. Hamas provided the flexible negotiations that Netanyahu in the past week succeeded, or the U.S. envoy succeeded to practice pressure on Netanyahu, and that made an agreement of 3 phases, each phase of 42 days. I think it is the best solution for the matters in Gaza, but it's important of the release of prisoners of both sides in 3 phases. That would signal of a full Israeli withdrawal of the Gaza Strip at the end of the 3rd phase, following the implementing the 1st phase that will be exceeded on the Friday. There is a desire of stopping a genocide war against the Palestinians due to the vicious Israeli practices by the Israeli occupation.
Mr. Al-Ashri, now, how critical will the inclusion of fuel in 50 out of 600 of the humanitarian aid trucks be for Gaza's recovery during the ceasefire?
Certainly, it is a great positive step that the Egyptian moderator, with the assistance of Qatar and US, to save the matters in the Gaza Strip. 15 months of the vicious aggression of no food, no heaters, new operated hospitals, and in the very harsh winter, many neonatal babies killed. So the entry of 600 of food and medical shipments, including the fuel shipments, will play a great role to regain a part of life to the people in Gaza, to operate the hospitals and the bakeries, and the electricity within hospitals that have been halted due to the aggressions of Israeli forces. Particularly, these shipments will reach to 600 on daily basis. That would pave a time factor to save the Palestinian and deliver the medical and food assistance with the allowance of opening the Rafah crossing to transport all the wounded in Cairo or in other countries. That Netanyahu and the far-right wing refused this before, despite the different variants that took place lately upon the arrivals of Donald Trump to the White House. So 80% Egypt of the assistance Egypt managed to deliver since the incidents up till now, which is the biggest number of the assistance to the Palestinian people. Cairo will continue its effort to entry 600 shipments daily. That is all credit goes to the Egyptian state.
Mr. Ashri, now, what challenges do you foresee in the implementation of the permanent ceasefire and the full Israeli withdrawal during phase 2 of the agreement?
Certainly, each phase of 40 days, and each step is determined by a date and a timetable. And I think there is a consensus between Hamas and Israel. They guarantee Egypt, Qatar and USA. So the dilemma is not of Hamas and the guaranteed parties, but in Netanyahu to execute the first phase and getting 33 of prisoners of the elderly and women and children, and then we fear that Netanyahu will do what he did in November when Egypt succeeded to get truce of the parties, and we found Netanyahu rejected to go back to negotiations. So we hope to foresee a strong American pressure in light of a new administration and its new resolution to be executed by Donald Trump with regard to the Israeli response and a full payment of all the phases. We should wait till the first phase to be executed, and then we have to wait for the executing the second and the third phases successfully.
Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, thank you very much for joining us, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go to the editor-in-chief of Al-Akhbar newspaper, Dr. Osama Saeed, who is joining us now to shed more light on the ceasefire agreement that has been reached in Gaza. Sir, how do you evaluate the role of Egypt, the US and Qatar in guaranteeing the implementation of the ceasefire agreement?
Certainly, there is a great role of these parties not to reach the agreement following in a long path of negotiation, relentless effort in order to reach an agreement. And I think it's that the biggest role executed by those parties to guarantee this agreement will be having a very pivotal role, and we cannot be ignored, particularly in a state of the repetitive abandon from the Israeli side. In previous negotiation, the attempt exerted by Netanyahu is always to spoil and abort any attempt of reaching an agreement that is sustainable and to have an end of this war. And I think in reaching this point is a success of the mediators, the political will that gathered all these mediators, in addition to the negotiation teams in reaching this pivotal point that in the future we can build upon.
Dr. Said, now, how significant is the commitment to release all the Palestinian women and children detained by Israel since October 7th of 2023 by the end of phase 1?
I think it is very important. That will expose how credible Israel would be, and if it wishes to move forward through the following phases of the agreement. Ultimately, if there are commitments upon Hamas, the Palestinian resistance, to release a specific number of the detainees in the Gaza Strip, in return, Israel should fulfill its part of the agreement by the releasing a number of the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners in the Israeli prisons. Particularly, there are thousands that Israel had been arrested following the 7th of October in 2023. Israel should show its commitment without any attempt of moving around with regard of the part related to release a number determined in agreement of the Palestinian side. That would signal a clear message to the possible to move forward of the following phases. Hence, to provide long-range solutions of having an end of this war.
And on the other hand, the implications, what are the implications of Hamas agreeing to release 33 Israeli detainees, including women, children and men over 50 years old?
I think that Hamas had provided compromises regarding a great number that reflected a desire of the Palestinian parties in reaching a truce, particularly in light of the deterioration of the humanitarian situation affected the populations of the sector. I think the Palestinian factions would abide to its articles to release the detainees they have according to the number stipulated in the agreement, and I imagine that they will follow this commitment. But the real fear of the non-seriousness of the Israeli cabinet, as previously showed in dealing with the Israeli side, that affirms that the Israeli government and Netanyahu personally is trying to create pretext hinders any attempt to move forward of having an end of the war. We should build on of what has been achieved and not to give a chance to Netanyahu to use any pretext to abort or to fail what have been achieved of a relentless effort regarding the truce and to pursue of a full ceasefire.
And so how likely really is it that the second phase of the agreement will proceed on schedule by the 16th day of phase 1?
I think at this phase it's going to have a very important because the matter will be relying on the Israeli withdrawal of the Gaza Strip, which is very important for the Palestinians as well as the whole region. The presence of Israel upon any Palestinian territories in the Gaza Strip would lead to fail the process of peace or the beginning of a vast negotiation to put an end of the war. The commitment to be fulfilled in the first phase is very important, and to move forward of the second phase that will be signal the approachment and reaching to regain stability and the calm that the Strip had missed throughout more than 15 months.
And sir, who do you think will oversee or monitor and ensure the delivery of the humanitarian aid and the respecting, rather, of the ceasefire agreement as well?
I think there is a UN mechanism adopted by the Security Council that never entered an execution term, and such a mechanism should be relaunched once again. Israel should be committed to open all the crossings that several Israeli crossings that intercepted with such that should be opened completely without any obstacles before the entry of delivery. Israel should withdraw from Rafah crossing in order to be ready to resume its activities and to contribute in delivering the assistance. Pressures internationally should be practiced upon Israel in order to facilitate that is required in delivering the assistance. And I think the Egyptian role had proven its capability to provide all facilitations logistically throughout the whole world to the Gaza Strip, in the land, in the sea, on air, and I think that the provision of these assistances, along with the UN mechanisms, could be a complete assistant of the Egyptian role that has that in the provision of the delivering the assistance to our brothers in the Gaza Strip.
Dr. Said, now, how will the return of the deceased and the reconstruction of Gaza be addressed in the third phase of the agreement?
In fact, this is a very important matter. Gaza decision be continued. The events of the 7th of October were one of the retaliation of the Israeli siege of this sector. Israeli measures should be reconsidered in this siege should be stopped, along with the guarantees and a paved way to open all the atmosphere in dealing with the economic and trade, addressing and the entrance of the Palestinian from and in and out of Gaza. The tools of the Israeli position be returned once again in Gaza in order to provide an atmosphere that aren't paved for the 7th of October incidents. And I think the main guarantees of not repeating such an event and the Israeli PC is to move seriously, transparently and clearly towards the two-state solutions. A political vision should be laid down and not to rely on the military and security measures. This is a temporary matter and cannot be cannot be considered sustainable for the Palestinian cause. The whole world and the international community should pressure Israel and its supporters not to accept the two-state solutions, and hence we can talk about sustainable solution and a full end of the imposed Israeli siege upon Gaza.
Dr. Said, do you feel that there might be any ripple effects as a result of reaching a Gaza ceasefire agreement to other surrounding regions?
If I understood the question correctly, I think it is just in reaching an agreement or to have a failure of the agreement would send a negative message to and attention to the regional parties that are very close attention to the region. I think a whole price and an ultimate price was paid due to such an election. After this would have an economic and political and security repercussions. And there are casualties, the region, the states. For instance, Egypt had lost more than $7 billion of the Suez Canal due to the tension of the events of the Red Sea that is linked in Gaza Strip. Everyone have an interest in reaching an agreement and truth. Most importantly, everyone have an interest to regain the state of stability that was lost in the Middle East, that should go back once again for the regional countries to continue in tackling their issues, the approach of development that the Middle East is in dire need.
Dr. Said, we are watching and witnessing a lot of joyous scenes in Gaza as people hear about the news of the Gaza ceasefire agreement being reached. Now, what would you say are the first or initial reactions by the Palestinians, the international communities, and inside Israel as well? Because there were a lot of skeptical voices from within Israel regarding reaching a ceasefire deal.
أو المشككة في هذا الاتفاق. Certainly, in reaching a ceasefire agreement is a very joy news for the Palestinians. These people were suffering from killing. Their people's complete families were eradicated. Such families and the innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip, certainly in reaching a truce, would be a good news for these people who lived in the cold, deprived of the health assistance, food and clothes and electricity. Suffering cannot be described by words. Certainly it's a good news for them, and I think that this good news will be for the international community, the Middle East countries, and a very joyful news for the families of the detainees of Israel. Those families demonstrated throughout the months demanding the return of their families and their beloved ones. Of course, such a part that never welcomed this truce, these are the extreme parties such as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, as they were always he never supported any attempts of having an end of the war, that these are very much beneficiary of the continuation of the war. They are manufacturing their popularity of the continuation and the atmosphere of the conflict. That would increase their popularity, that taking advantage of the war into expanding the Israeli influence to be extended on the expense of the territories neighboring Israel.
Dr. Osama Said, thank you very much, sir, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, an Egyptian high-level source has confirmed that a joint statement will be issued soon. The high-level source has also announced that an agreement has been reached to end the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza through mediation efforts. And while official joint statement has not been released yet, Reuters has reported that Hamas and Israel have reached a ceasefire agreement. The implementation of the agreement will be guaranteed by Egypt, the United States and Qatar. The deal is structured in phases, with the first phase focusing on detainee releases and a 6-week ceasefire. Israel has agreed to release all Palestinian women and children detained since October 7th of 2023 by the end of the first phase. Meanwhile, Hamas has committed to releasing 33 Israeli detainees, including all women, children and men over the age of 50. The second phase is set to begin by the 16th day of the first phase, and it will include a permanent ceasefire, the full Israeli withdrawal from central Gaza, and the release of additional detainees. The third phase is expected to focus on the return of the deceased individuals and the reconstruction of Gaza. As part of the agreement, 600 truckloads of humanitarian aid will be allowed into Gaza each day during the ceasefire. Of those trucks, 50 will carry fuel, while 300 trucks will be allocated to northern Gaza, where many refugees are expected to return under the terms of the deal. And according to a source to Qnews, the Gaza ceasefire agreement has been finalized, addressing key issues such as the reconstruction of Gaza, the opening of border crossings, and the movement of both people and goods. The source added that the agreement includes a detainee exchange between the two sides, marking a significant step towards restoring lasting calm in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, we are once again joined by Dr. Mohammed Osman, the International Relations Specialist. Dr. Osman, thank you for staying with us. Sir, how do you think the inclusion of Gaza's reconstruction in the agreement, how do you think it will affect the long-term stability?
Well, the inclusion of this issue in the agreement proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that this is a comprehensive agreement with very long-term dimensions, meaning that it takes into account the preserving long-term stability in Gaza and the cessation of hostilities, and preserving stability and ensuring the restoration of normalcy to the people of the Gaza Strip requires reconstruction. And I think that a commitment to reconstruction efforts is a very positive sign. It means that this ceasefire agreement is here to stay, because some Israeli sources in the media before the announcements that were made were always saying that this will be a temporary arrangement, that this will be a 6-week ceasefire or a 90-day ceasefire. However, now I think we can speak with certainty to a great extent that this is a permanent ceasefire, because no one would even contemplate the idea of reconstruction without a permanent cessation of hostilities in place. And I think that the international community, the United Nations, many countries in the Arab world will be willing to pitch in order to reconstruct Gaza, to rebuild what has been destroyed. And now I think that the time is ripe. And I hope that this course of action is taken to discuss a comprehensive settlement of the Palestinian question, the Palestinian cause, as Dr. Osama said earlier. It's very important that we not neglect the Palestinian issue just because a conflict is not going on there anymore. Actually, pressure has to be exercised at this point to capitalize on the current achievement and the milestones that have been reached in order to actually restart meaningful peace negotiations on the basis of the two-state solution on the 1967 borders, the West Bank, the entirety of the West Bank, the entirety of Gaza, East Jerusalem, as a homeland for the Palestinian people, a sovereign Palestinian state that is already recognized by over 140 countries. This huge turn of events that we are witnessing now has to be exploited. I do not believe this will happen. However, as we have seen, anything could happen. If you would have asked me yesterday whether this ceasefire was feasible, I would have told you that I was much less optimistic. However, today I was profoundly wrong, and I'm glad that I was wrong. And I'm glad that the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, has managed, along with the pivotal role of Egypt as a core mediator, as well as the state of Qatar, in pressuring the Israelis into a deal. That is a historic moment indeed.
Well, everybody is optimistic for both sides to actually be committed to the agreement. So how significant and critical is it that the detainee exchange be included in the Gaza ceasefire agreement in terms of building trust between the parties involved?
I think that the implementation of the detainee, as far as we know, at least from what has been announced and published, that it would be implemented gradually over the first phase, over 40 days, I think. And it will witness the release of 33 Israeli detainees, old women and children, and the elderly and children, and also like all the women are among those 33, even those who have a military background, will be released. In return, a sizable amount of Palestinian prisoners of war will be released, including all of the children and the women that were detained by the Israeli occupation since October 7, 2023. The gradual implementation of this agreement in all of its phases, especially in terms of the detainee exchange, serves to build confidence, serves to keep both parties, especially the Israelis, committed, preserve their commitment to the implementation of this agreement. And I think one of the main motivations behind the change of heart of the United States, and especially the pressure from the incoming Trump administration, was the release of the detainees, especially those detainees with an American citizenship in the custody of Hamas and other resistance groups in the Gaza Strip. So I think it's a step forward. And again, I am optimistic, and I think that things now the Palestinians of Gaza will definitely live to see better days, better at least than the grim days they have had to suffer for the past 15 months.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody is optimistic, but as you've mentioned, Dr. Osman, before, that maybe also there should be some cautiousness regarding the whole process. So what measures are needed to ensure the return to calm and maintaining peace throughout the ceasefire period? And if the agreement or the ceasefire is interrupted by any chance, what are the steps to be followed afterwards?
Well, first of all, one of the main prerequisites of the preservation of this ceasefire will be that Israel honors all of its terms, meaning that the Israelis will have to withdraw from the designated parts of Gaza in accordance with the timetable stipulated by the agreement. Because we see another example of Lebanon, which is being implemented very poorly, as you can see. And the Israelis are even speaking of long-term maintaining a long-term presence inside southern Lebanon. I fear that we could see a repeat of this nonsense by the Israelis in Gaza, and this could be detrimental to the entire agreement, because Gaza is very different. The situation in Gaza is very different from the situation in southern Lebanon. And an Israeli withdrawal from the entirety of the Gaza Strip after the expiration of all the phases of the agreement is essential. And if it doesn't happen, then this agreement there will be a risk that this agreement could collapse. Another thing is ensuring the complete facilitation of humanitarian aid in order to ensure that a sense of normalcy and the meeting of basic needs can be extended to the entirety of the Gaza Strip. And also another important factor is allowing the people, the displaced residents of northern Gaza, hundreds of thousands of people, to return to what's left of their homes, to return to Gaza City, to return to Ashat refugee camp, to return to the rubble of Jabalia and Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun. Will the Israelis honor all of these terms? The answer does not lie within the goodwill of the Israelis, because they possess none. It only lies on the amount of pressure that the United States and the other mediators and the international community and even the Arab countries as well are willing to exert on the Israelis in order for them to honor that. Egypt is pressuring very hard and has been pressuring very hard towards a settlement and towards peace since the beginning of this war. Other Arab stakeholders have been doing the same. The United States, however, which is the most important actor because they are the patron of Israel, basically, has a very poor record in this regards. So maybe the Trump administration now has shown very good signs. They caught us off guard. Trump, as always, a very unpredictable president. In the amount of pressure he actually exerted on the Israelis, showing that the United States can actually direct and contain and control Israeli behavior and conduct and policies if they want to. I think it will depend on the United States, Trump's United States willingness to implement this agreement in its entirety.
Dr. Osman, please stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our coverage regarding the agreement and reaching the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. We are witnessing a lot of joyous and celebratory scenes from Gaza. We will be continuing our live coverage here with Selma Al-Fi'i, so please don't go away.
We continue our special coverage on the latest updates of the Israel and Hamas agreeing to Gaza ceasefire and detainee deal. An Egyptian high-level source has confirmed that a joint statement will be issued soon. The high-level source has also announced that an agreement has been reached to end the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza through mediation efforts. While official joint statement has not yet been released, Reuters has reported that Hamas and Israel have reached a ceasefire agreement. The implementation of the agreement will be guaranteed by Egypt, the United States, and Qatar. The deal is structured in phases, with the first phase focusing on detainee releases and a 6-week ceasefire. Israel has agreed to release all Palestinian women and children detained since October the 7th, 2023, by the end of the first phase. Meanwhile, Hamas has committed to releasing 33 Israeli detainees, including all women, children, and men over the age of 50. The second phase is set to begin by the 16th day of the first phase, which will include a permanent ceasefire, the full Israeli withdrawal from central Gaza, and the release of additional detainees. The third phase is expected to focus on the return of deceased individuals and the reconstruction of Gaza. And as part of the agreement, 600 truckloads of humanitarian aid will be allowed into Gaza each day during the ceasefire. Of those trucks, 50 will carry fuel, while 300 trucks will be allocated to northern Gaza, where many refugees are expected to return under the terms of the deal. And according to a source to Qnews, the Gaza ceasefire agreement has been finalized, addressing key issues such as the reconstruction of Gaza, the opening of the border crossings, and the movement of both people and goods. The source added that the agreement includes a detainee exchange between the two sides, marking a significant step towards restoring lasting calm in the region. The United States President-elect Donald Trump has also commented on the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire agreement on his social media platform, Truth Social, saying they have an agreement regarding detainees in the Middle East and they will be released soon. And for further analysis, joining us from Cairo is the political analyst Mohammed Abu Shama. And welcome to Qnews, sir. Let me start off by asking you, what is your assessment of the roles played by Egypt, the US and Qatar in ensuring the enforcement of the ceasefire agreement?
In the outset, I would like to welcome to you and thank you for having me. I think the agreement will be having a delayed announcement for the guarantees and to guarantee the commitments of Israel to execute the terms and conditions of the deal. There's no doubt that Egypt and Qatar and naturally the United States of America, two administrations are ready to leave and to come. Both were having a pressure to the Netanyahu government to guarantee and or rather to grant the Palestinians some hope and the joys that we can see throughout the screens for the Palestinian people who suffered throughout the months due to the fighting. And a great suffering will be stopped tonight upon the announcement of the terms and conditions of the deal. And there's no doubt that the mediators played a role throughout the negotiations that have been felt before we arrived to this delicate moment to announce the details of the deal. And I think that to a large extent they are satisfactory for the Palestinian people to guarantee delivery of the humanitarian aid and the entry of the fuel and all the conditions of the Israeli withdrawal from the south to the north and to allow the Palestinians to go to the north. So this all would guarantee to the things to go back to normal, that this through three movements that divided the three phases. Most importantly, the first one of 3 weeks on a timetable for a successive release of the detainees and Hamas in return were release some prisoners.
Sir, actually regarding the specific point you were just mentioning, how important is the pledge to release all the Palestinian women and children detained by Israel since October the 7th, 2023 by the conclusion of phase 1? How do you think this is going to actually be enforced?
It is the non-release of the following 7th of October. The agreement did not, what I've reached does not include to release the Israeli detainees or the Palestinian detainees. What did you mean by the prisoners? Are they Israelis or Palestinians?
No, I'm asking about the Palestinians being released, the women and the children.
I did not see any details regarding this matter, and I think that this point of disagreement what has been said following the 7th of October to release the Israeli detainees captured by Hamas in different ages. The Palestinian detainees will be released according conditions imposed by the Israeli state. In return, in each Israeli detainees will be released. In return, a number of the Palestinians will be released. Under the timetable of releasing 33 Israeli detainees of the ages that exceeded 50 years old and less than 18 years regarding women and children. These some of the leaks that announced of the first phase, the humanitarian shipments will be entered that piled in the Rafah crossings in Egypt, and I think the announced numbers of entering shipments are good. The guarantee 50 fuel shipments that would allow the operations of the hospitals and some vital areas will be regain its operations, such as the bakeries and the fuel station. So it's just like an revived the life in the Gaza Strip again. We hope that Israel to abide with the terms. I think it guarantees it's in a decisive matter. We've seen in several truce agreements between the Arabs and Israel. And we had a very close story with the fragile truce between Israel and Lebanon. But there's no doubt the matter here is different.
Oh, well, sir, can you actually, now that we're mentioning about the obstacles, maybe what, in your opinion, do you think are the obstacles that could arise maybe in achieving a permanent ceasefire and the full Israeli withdrawal during phase 2 of the agreement?
Israel, as always, is creating pretexts related to secure the Israel inside and to direct airstrikes to areas that have some concern, as we've seen in Lebanon, by doing a continued breaches of truce. But the matter, it seems to me, is somehow different, as the Israeli side has a great pressure. So firstly, that is fighting throughout 15 months in different fronts that executed the economic capabilities of the Israeli occupation state as well as the Israeli armies and their capability to continue that period. And I think what have been achieved on the level of the Middle East level that satisfied some Israelis as a result of the fall of the Al-Assad regime and the exiting of the Iranian processes that used to topple the Israel and the setback of the capabilities of Iran. And upon the arrival of Donald Trump to the White House, that would increase the prestige of Iran to the tops. So Iran will be diminished internally, as seen in the introductions took place right now. What have been achieved, Israel is strategically satisfied. Also, the internal pressure of the Israeli cabinet that featured by the families' demonstration of the detainees and Netanyahu's stances due the trials, all these matters made that this deal is an urgent and also Israel needs to have a break and rearrange its papers, waiting for the arrivals of Donald Trump to rearrange the matters of the Middle East. And I think Netanyahu was in need to gain the trust of Trump by taking this step to guarantee to be successful to the tops, to guarantee the release of the Israeli detainees by Hamas. And the timetable being laid down would guarantee throughout the period of the truce, in which the first one of 6 weeks gradually detainees will be released. That will guarantee the fulfillment of Israel of what abide to in the deal. And I think this scenario is closely to be executed due to the factor you've indicated, that to make the deal as a safe haven to come out of the long run.
And that was the political analyst Mohammed Abu Shama. Thank you so much for joining us and for your insights at Q News. And for further analysis, we are also joined from Cairo by the International Relations Specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Welcome to Q News, sir. And let me start off by asking you, can you further explain what is the proposed agreement?
For having me, Salma. I think for the first time in 15 months, an actual agreement has been reached, an agreement that is comprehensive in many aspects, a detainee exchange over several phases that will witness the release of all of the Israeli detainees in exchange for the release of a significant portion or a sizable amount of Palestinian prisoners of war, including all of the women and children who have been detained by the occupation forces since October 7, 2023. Also, we have a long-term ceasefire that is supposed to transform into a permanent ceasefire by the end of the time frame and the different phases of this agreement, and an Israeli withdrawal, gradual withdrawal from Gaza, at least in the initial phases, from central Gaza and from the urban, inhabited urban areas to the peripheries of the Gaza Strip, with the proposed plan of a full evacuation by the Israeli troops of the Gaza Strip, and also the facilitation of the entry of international humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, 600 trucks daily, including 50 fuel trucks or 50 fuel tankers. 300 of those 600 trucks are designated for northern Gaza Strip. Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, why do you think Israel was continuing its bombing during the ceasefire negotiations? Why do you think this was happening?
Well, this is how Israel behaves, in the most violent and barbaric manner. This is a nation that has been devoid of any moral substance or any principles, unfortunately. And this is what we have known the Israelis for decades, and now they will not surprise us anymore because they are known for their rather twisted approaches to settlements, speaking of a ceasefire and a peace agreement, and at the same time employing violent tactics in order to exert a maximum amount of pressure. However, the Israelis this time, I think, are under an insurmountable amount of pressure to honor at least this agreement temporarily by the regional mediators, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and its very important role in brokering this agreement, as well as the role of the Qataris who helped.
And the US.
Yes, and the United States, of course, who had a central role in exerting actual pressure on the Israeli government, and especially the incoming Trump administration. The Trump administration has surprised all of us, even though Trump is known for his unconditional support for Israel. However, he surprised us by actually managing to exercise actual support before even taking office on the Israeli occupation authorities. So that's rather, and it's a pleasant surprise, as we were speaking off air today, Salma.
Yep. Well, let me ask you, Dr. Osman, how guaranteed is the ceasefire expected to continue beyond the first phase of the deal?
I think it has a reasonable chance to succeed. However, we cannot, of course, discount any possibilities or any unfortunate developments. The Israelis are very well known for dishonoring each and every agreement they have ever adhered to. And we are seeing that live, for example, in Lebanon. Lebanon has been in a state of ceasefire since late November. However, the Israelis have not honored most of the terms of this ceasefire, carrying out daily attacks and demolitions and refusing to withdraw from certain areas and whatnot. Will we see a similar situation in Gaza? Probably not, at least in the first phase. And I sincerely hope that we will not see it at all. However, we cannot outrule any Israeli violations or intransigence in this regard. If the United States is not committed to exerting the maximum amount of pressure on Israel, the Israelis will violate the agreement definitely, and might even push us back into war.
And that was the International Relations Specialist, Mr. Dr. Mohammed Osman. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us and being with us in Q News. And this concludes our special coverage for tonight. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.